Welcome. I am Lou Ignarro, Nobel laureate in medicine and chair of the Scientific Committee on Dialogues Beyond Borders, presented by the Menarini International Foundation. Today, I am most pleased to present our interview with Professor Aaron Ciechanover, Distinguished University Professor at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. Professor Ciechanover was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2004 for his original discovery of ubiquitin-mediated protein degradation. His discoveries have opened up an entirely new understanding of how cells degrade and recycle proteins using the small protein ubiquitin. In this interview, Professor Ciechanover will elaborate on his pivotal discoveries, but in addition, he will talk about his passion and motivation for discoveries in nature. I hope you enjoy this interview.
Welcome, Professor Aaron Ciechanover, biologist, now at Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa, Israel, awarded with the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2004 with Abraham Hershko and Irwin Rose for the discovery of ubiquitin-mediated protein degradation. This is Dialogues Beyond Borders, a project organized by Fondazione Internazionale Menarini, whose goal is to explore the concept of boundaries, geographical, scientific, but also personal limits to cross. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. First of all, I'd like to know something about the fact that now you are a very well-known scientist, and you once said that science is your passion, but also your hobby. When you come back home, you read papers, scientific papers. So how did this desire to do research come about?
It's an irresistible pulse. It's like an addiction to a drug, the satiety, the carving for knowledge. And I say that it's a hobby. Mostly I use it when I talk to young children, and young children are worried about their career. So the canonical way was to separate between working a job, you're going to work in order to make money. In the afternoon, you're reading newspaper and you have family, which is right. But I think that if your job or your work is a hobby, then you never stop. You are not looking at the clock. You are not waiting for the time to pass. Choose something that will be your hobby, and then some stupid body like my university will pay you for it. That's ideal. I'm doing my hobby, somebody pays me for it, and I'm enjoying it immensely. But I think deep inside, there is nothing like a new discovery. It's like playing chess with God. I mean, because we are dealing with nature, and nature is indifferent to us. Nature doesn't know about us. We are studying nature. But nature is there. Nature has been there before. Nature will be there after. You know, the snake, the animals, the beautiful plants, the colors, the flowers, everything is there, and we study them. But they are indifferent to us. And to cracking their secrets for curiosity initially, but also for human benefit, to develop drugs in order to fight the defaults of nature, I think it's hilarious. And also, I think that what's embedded in science that people don't appreciate is the fact that it's more than international. It doesn't care who you are. You are Italian, I'm an Israeli. Scientists always find immediately common language. They have common purpose, benefiting humankind and deciphering the secrets of nature. I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your language. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your skin color. I don't care about anything. We exchange ideas that have a lot of commonality in them. You know, in a world where Russia is fighting Ukraine and people are killing one another because one is black and one is white and people are hating one another and so on, I think that science is unique in being not only international but also cooperative and collaborative. It's the opposite of the society, the complete opposite, and therefore it's so unique.
What do you like the most when you're doing research? The fact that you are achieving a goal, a result, or the fact that you are moving toward the result, the goal or the trip to go to the goal?
Well, once you're achieving a goal, then there is the next goal. Because, of course, it's the process itself. It's the thinking, how to design an experiment to solve a problem. Once you get the solution, it's not interesting anymore, and then you are moving next. I think that asking an important question, but at the same time also designing a tool to solve it, that's the issue. So you can ask, okay, I want to live 200 years. This is an interesting question, but it's not solvable because you don't have tools. How can I jump from 80 to 85 to 200? There is no way. So I think that the combination of asking a good question that can be solved, this is the trick in science. And I think that there is nothing more that make you more drunken and dreaming, flood you with happiness, than the design and then the success of the design. And of course, and then you move to the next step. When I was a kid, and that's something that I also teach young people, I try to convince them. I'm always opening, since I'm in a medical school, I'm always opening the talk to young medical students. And I'm trying to convince them to go to science, or at least to be curious about scientific questions. And I tell them that when I was young and I was naive, I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied medicine. And then I thought, okay, if I'll be a doctor, I don't want anything more in life. But then I became a doctor, and then come the problem, and then of medicine, and that you cannot cure diseases, and there are poor people that cannot pay, and so on and so forth. And then you move. So I tell them, in life, you have no purpose. Life is a collection of experiences that you move from one to another. Think about billionaires. You want to make the first $1 million. After making the first million, these people make the second, and then they're making the 10, and then they're making billion, and then they're making 10 billion, and then they die, and they leave 99.9999% of all their yachts and airplanes and everything behind. I think that the idea is right to enjoy it and to collect experience, because achieving a goal, then what do you do after? You become a doctor, so what? Then you become a professor, so what? And then you become a dean, so what? And then people ask me even that you got the Nobel Prize. What next? I say, next? An interesting question. I mean, so what shall I say? People ask me, what did you do with the Nobel Prize? I say, I was happy for one day. I was happy for another day, and then for another day. And the fourth day, I went back to the laboratory. Because you cannot celebrate for the rest of your life. Life is not about celebration. Life is about moving on. So I think that we should change our view of life from being goal-oriented to being interesting experiences-oriented.
Let's talk about the discovery that led you to the Nobel Prize, ubiquitin and its role. Can you explain in simple words what the role of ubiquitin is, and what are the function? Why is it is so important to for the functions of our body?
We are all made of proteins. I will not go into any technological jargon. You know, the red blood, the red is a protein called hemoglobin. The muscles that you are moving, the fact that you are sitting next to me and not falling apart, is because of your muscles. The muscles are made of protein that are contracting and holding one another. Actin and myosin, digesting the food that we just had in the nice coffee break by enzymes that are proteins. The antibodies are immunizing you against COVID-19 are proteins. Now, proteins are wonderful machines, but they have disadvantage. They are extremely sensitive. They are sensitive to heat, they are sensitive to mutation, they are sensitive to irradiation, they are sensitive to everything. And some of them get out of function. And once they get out of function, we can become sick. And I'll bring you one example. All the brain diseases like Alzheimer are due to proteins that get aggregated. They become like hard egg and precipitate in the brain, and they are not removed, and they are causing damage that will lead to Alzheimer, to Parkinson, and to many other diseases. So you need a machinery that will take away proteins that have been damaged and replace them with new proteins that are functioning. And that's what we discovered. We discovered the machinery that is a damage control, a quality control machinery that removes proteins that have been damaged. So this is one function. The other function is to remove healthy protein. Why to remove healthy protein? I'll tell you why. Let's say that you have COVID-19 or flu, and you are developing antibodies. But once the flu is over, you don't need these antibodies anymore. So the antibodies are good. They will neutralize flu, but you don't have flu, so why do I need them? So you remove them, because otherwise we'll be flooded with antibodies against measles and against rubella and against jaundice and against everything. But if we don't have the disease, why should we have them? So the role of the ubiquitin function is to remove proteins. A, damaged proteins. B, healthy proteins that concluded and finished their function and therefore now can be removed. If they are not removed, the damaged proteins, they will cause disease. So this is the system that we discovered. It's called ubiquitin because the major protein there is ubiquitin, but we should not go how it works and so on. This all really technical. And because the system is so important, people discovered that if the system doesn't work, there are many diseases. So if people discover diseases, the pharma company are developing drugs. So there are now many drugs in the market that are fighting diseases that are caused by aberrations in the system. Now, we didn't mean to do all that. We were driven by curiosity. Though I'm a physician by training, I was not interested at all in diseases. I was driven by curiosity. By the way, the drugs were not developed by us. We laid the foundation. We discovered the system, but without discovering the system, you cannot develop a drug because you need a system that the drug will act on. So it shows you also the chain in science, that somebody is doing the basic, then somebody else is discovering diseases, then somebody else is developing drugs, and so on and so forth. So this is again a testimony to the internationality of science. I don't know the people well, I know them, who decided to take our discovery furthermore, one step forward to discover diseases and then to do drugs. That's the beauty. You publish and it becomes the public domain. People are using it and they move one step forward. But I think that we were driven by curiosity, and we should not forget the main role of science is to expand knowledge in many ways. There are people that are studying the atmosphere, the expansion of Earth. There will be no drugs out of it, but expanding knowledge is awfully important. We want to understand the world in which we are living. We are human beings, we are intellectuals, we are intelligent, we are knowledge hungry. So I think that just satisfying curiosity is an important reason enough to move science forward, and then application will come later. I'm sure that good science, we might start to explore now the space. People are now flying to the moon to understand how life were created, and so on and so forth. But I think that the basic motive is curiosity. And if you are doing it well, application like drugs will come on later.
Is there anything you are afraid of when you're doing research, maybe to achieve different results than those you wanted to reach? And is it possible, in your opinion, to get risky results?
I'm not afraid of that for sure, because it's nature. And I don't know what the result will be. I try to predict it, but if nature shows me something else, that's it. That's the truth. So you're not purpose-oriented. You're not designing nature. Nature has already been designed. I'm planning, but I'm not expecting. Whatever nature will show me, this is fine with me. I'm a risk taker. You must take a risk. So when we started the system, we didn't know anything. And people at that time were mostly involved with DNA and protein generation, protein synthesis. We were interested in how proteins are degraded. It was the opposite. Nobody was working on it. But we came from a small country, from Israel. We were very limited in resources. So we said, instead of riding the highway, we shall take the side road where there will be no traffic. And if there is no traffic, it's risky, it's slower, you are not driving fast, but you are free of competition from the big sharks. You are doing something against the fashion. And then the risk is high, but on the other hand, the gain, if you are successful, is also very high. So high risk, high gain.
Do you think that science should have boundaries, limits not to cross? What limits should a researcher set for himself?
Limiting knowledge is a little bit risky because you never know what's behind, like in our science. Well, you might argue that our science was not risky, but if we would not have discovered what we discovered, there will be no novel drug for cancer. But you need to balance the knowledge with the risk. So let's go to sociology, okay? And let's say that I want to monitor the IQ of different ethnic groups. It would be very interesting to understand IQ, what builds. But this is a very risky science, because on one hand it's attractive, on the other hand, if you might discover that some ethnic groups have a lower intelligence in your criteria, you might risk the integrity of society. I'm not talking even about violence, it's about offending people, discrimination, and so on and so forth. So I think that there should be some limits, and though knowledge may not be satisfied, the integrity of society is much more important. Studying risky viruses. Think the pandemic today, what happened with the pandemic. People are still not sure how the virus came, whether it came from a laboratory in China or whether it came from the market, from the fish market. We don't know yet. So think about if it came from a laboratory. I don't believe, by the way, that it came from a laboratory. I think it came from nature. But if it came from a laboratory, think what it did to the world. The economy, 15 million people died, if not more, 15 million people. 150,000,000 died. So the damage is huge. So maybe studying dangerous viruses, and so on and so forth. So there should be limits. Maybe cloning people should be limited. But on the other hand, science is not a standalone entity. Politics is part of it. And I think that democracy is the key to success in science, because democracy might not be the ideal system, but it's clearly the optimal system. Because in democracy, there are checks and balances. Even if I want to study something, the establishment around me will not allow me. They will not fund me, because they say this is risky. If you are living in a totalitarian regime, it's at the hand of Hitler or Putin to decide what the scientist will do. And therefore, I think that democracy, with all its disadvantages, is still the optimal system because of the juridical system, because of the press, because of the media, because of the communication. So I'm not free in democracy to study what I want. They will limit me. Even if I have a crazy mind, the society will limit me. My students will limit me because you grow up in a democratic society. So for me, I don't need somebody to warn me, because I am a social democrat by nature, because I grew up in a home and in a country, and I already, these values are deep into my blood. But there are people that might need it. And therefore, yes, science should have boundaries, and it's better for science, and it's true, to flourish and to evolve in democracies rather than in totalitarian regimes. Because in totalitarian regimes, look what happened during the Nazi time, where physicians betrayed completely the basic laws of ethics of medicine, tortured people, did experiments on people, and so on and so forth. So in a democratic regime, this could never have happened. So I think that the limits of science should also, be connected to the ecosystem in which they are flourishing, because all what we are talking is true for Italy and for England and for the US and for Canada and for Israel and for Japan, but it's not true for countries that I don't want even to mention.
Science and politics, science and science communication. What about science and religion? Because I know that when you were young, you used to dry your flowers in the Talmud books. So I think it's a nice metaphor of what can happen. I mean, do you think there are overlap between the two areas?
It's an awfully difficult question. I try to be very gentle. I will not tell you everything that is on my heart, so people will not burn the interview. When I dried flowers in the Talmud, which is the interpretation to the Bible, one of the interpretations to the Bible, to the Jewish Bible, it's a book full of wisdom, which I deeply appreciate. I didn't think even about it. I was like 10 years old. I thought about it only as a heavy book that can dry the flowers. Now I'm being asked by children. It's amazing. Children are asking me, do you believe in God or not? And they are direct. They are not shying out. Children are very naive. They say, is there God or isn't there God? As if I know. Who am I to know? I have my belief, but I ain't. And there are so many religious people. But the fact that there are so many religions, and even within a religion, there are so many flavors, tells us that, in my opinion, it's more of a culture. Because if it was fixed and everything, it was a microphone, then it was a microphone. Nobody will say, this is not a microphone. It's a microphone. And it's made of metal, of titanium. So, and we know what is titanium, how many electrons are there, and so on. So the fact that there are many religions, and many shrines, and many prayers, and even within every religion, there are different streams, and everybody has its own interpretation. For me, it's a culture, and it's a good culture. It's a moral culture. And I think that people should adapt for them. They should be free to adapt for themselves whatever they want. They can move across religion. If they want to crucify to become Christian, they should become Christian. If they want to be Catholic, Protestant, Lutherans, whatever they want, they should be. They should pray, they should do whatever they want. The only thing is that they should not enforce their own belief on somebody else. This is the only limit. Otherwise, it should be completely free. And I said to children, to young children, you know, God is in my heart. I adopted moral principles that I'm not saying don't torture, don't kill, don't, these are basic. Don't betray, don't lie, and so on. I adopted fundamental moral principles that should be common to all religion, but mostly I adopted one principle: no violence at all. No way in the world. And then you can believe in whatever you want, whether God created us or God didn't create us and who created us, and so on and so forth. So I think that religion is also a history. You know, the Jews had temple in Jerusalem, so I have very deep relation to my capital, to Jerusalem, which is the eternal capital of the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. So it relates also to history. Religion also relates to thousands of years of art, of music, of language, of literature. I mean, it's an ecosystem. It's not, okay, we have a prayer book and we get up in the morning or go to the church on Sunday or to the synagogue on Saturday. It's much more than that. It's a family-oriented. We have holidays. We have Christmas. We have the first of the year, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, or Passover. Easter is celebrated by the Christian. So it's family-oriented event. We have non-religious holidays like Thanksgiving in America, and so on and so forth. So it has many more values in it, and it's better for us to adopt other values as well, the moral values, the family values, the cultural, the historical. But once we are making a crusade or establishing the Inquisition in Spain or in Portugal and trying to enforce it on other people, then we are losing it. So for me, it's a culture. It's really a deep culture, and I'm Jewish. I'm a proud Jewish. I know the practice of Judaism. Whether there is a God that sits in an address and I can talk to him or send him letters, let's leave this question aside. I'm a scientist. They also ask me about whether there is God or not, or they say to me, do you feel that there is a contradiction between being a scientist and believing? And I say, no, if you adopt religion as a culture, of course there is no contradiction. It's very interesting because in Israel also there are many theological discussions between religious science and non-religious science. And that's very interesting. People who are really believing in the Jewish God. And I have such a good friend. And we have a discussion about it. And the argument of people who are less religious like I am, that as a scientist I want a proof. If you show me that there is a God, I will believe it. Like you show me this is the microphone, when I speak to the microphone, the person who records my lecture is there. We know that the voice is transmitted, that's a fact. If you show me that there is a God, I believe. He said, by asking me to show you that there is a God, you're already dismantling the question, because God is beyond that. God is not a microphone. God is not be inside the realm of a definition that you understand. You understand what is a microphone. But if I explain you God in the terms of a microphone, it will not be God anymore. It will be a microphone. So we are not equipped with the tools to understand even the existence of God. That's what he tells me. So forget about science and forget about the proof. God is beyond the scientific proof, because if God would have been something that can be beyond proved by science, then it will become a scientific issue, a scientific item, and God is not a scientific item. So you see, in this discussion we are going on parallel lines. I'm looking for a scientific proof, and he tells me that there is an axiom, there is no scientific. So we are moving completely in parallel, we are not approaching one another. So there is an inherited contradiction even in the attempt to run a discussion. And I understand it, I completely understand it. And for me, I'm settling down in a layer that says, yes, I am religious, but at the cultural level.
Coming back to ubiquitin, how can we define ourselves given the fact that we are changing ourselves every day, every week, every month? So who are we and how can we always be the same?
By changing the material, as you said, because we are changing our proteins every minute, some of them every minute, some of them every hour, some of them every day. But in a month or 2 or 3, we are completely different. But we are the same, because we look at the window, at the mirror, and we are the same. We love the same woman, we love the same children, we have the memory, we have the artistic talents. If we are painter or scientist, we know. So how can it be that the hardware is gone, but the software remains? It's not like a computer. If you buy a new computer, identical computer, you need to take the software from one, all your photos, and move it to the next one. You can leave it in the cloud if you want. We are very different than a computer because the software remains the same and even becomes better. Because in these 2 days, I added to my memory Firenze. Well, I've been here many times in this beautiful city. 2 weeks from now, people will ask me, where have you been 2 weeks? Oh, I went to the Donatello exhibit in Palazzo Strozzo, and I went to the Bargello, and I went to the Uffizi, and new people that I know, like you and Giuseppe. So these are even added. I've even improved my memory, despite the fact that the proteins are not there. So this is a fundamental biological question. At the end of the day, we are made of proteins. We are not made of spirit. There are no propellers in your head. Forget about human spirit. There is no human spirit. It's all chemistry. It's all molecules that are carrying out life. We are made of molecules. We are chemists. So memory is also chemistry. It can be electric current, but it's still chemistry. So what changed? How can it be that the basic fundamental elements are gone, but the spirit, so-called, is still there? We don't know the answer. We absolutely do not understand the answer. Some of it can be permanent protein that stay forever, which is hard to believe. Some of them can be imprinting. So one protein imprint itself on the other. And this is true in diseases. The prion disease are diseases of imprinting. They're what we call the mad cow disease. Let's put it in a term that is more known to the public. The mad cow disease is a disease of imprinting. There is a bad protein and it makes a copy of itself on other proteins. Like if I put my hand on your thigh for a long time, it will remain there for some time. So I imprint myself into another protein. So this is one thinking about how the memory is perpetuated. There are many other theories, but it's still, I think, one of the most fundamental question in science. And it's true not only for us, because we regard ourselves as supreme creatures, and it's true for the cat, and it's true for the snake, and it's true for the chicken, and it's true for everything, and even for plants. Plants don't have a memory in the full sense of the word, but they know to go after the light by proteins and so on and so forth. So it's true for almost every certain living organism. That despite the fact that the hardware is changing, the software remains identical and even. And then come, of course, the question of aging. Why do we age? If I change myself and I renew myself, why should I age? I should remain young forever. And then comes other systems that don't let us, the quality control and so on. So you see, the question has many ramifications. It's not ending up by just that. It's a very interesting and exciting question.
Last questions about something that you said before during your speech. What are the boundaries of disease? How can we define a disease given the fact that the predictive medicine is changing our landscape? So I have a cold, I'm ill. I have cancer, I'm ill. But what if I find biomarker in my blood and I'm going to be ill? I'm still ill. How can we decide?
An excellent question. I think that we should really stay away from definitions. What we should ask is, what should we do? We stay away from definitions because we still don't know what is the definition of a gene. Until now, people are discussing. Marian Legato talked this morning in her introductory talk about a gene. People think, okay, it's a piece of DNA that encodes RNA, messenger RNA that encodes a protein. But if the gene is methylated and attenuated, and if the gene is mutated, and there is a new gene that is coming out, out of the same gene that was mutated, and it has a gain of function, and so on and so forth. So I think that we should really subject ourselves to nature. And yes, the question of biomarker, for example, it shouldn't be on biomarker. Let's say that we have a baby, and we sequence the DNA of a baby, and we find a mutation in Huntington, and we predict that the baby for sure will have Huntington disease at the age of 50. Is the baby that was born yesterday sick or not sick? And what should we do? We don't know, because the canonical definition of a sickness is exactly like you said. I have fever, I feel bad, I cannot get up into work, I call my employer, and I say, or I call my worker and I say, no, we don't open the shop today, or I don't come to teach in school, or I don't know what. This is gone. This is completely gone. And it became very soft. The margins of the definition become very soft. And so are the margins of treatment. Treatment until now was a drug. I give you a drug, I operate on the cancer, I do something. No, the treatment may be follow-up. The treatment may be correcting the gene by CRISPR. The treatment may be something completely else. So the treatment and the patient also should change. You know, if I can diagnose a disease at the stage of the sperm or at the stage of the egg, even before there is an embryo, I may try to repair the egg or to repair the sperm. Again, we are walking into a very sensitive minefield of religion. You know, whether I should abort the embryo, if it's an embryo, or whether, what is an embryo? What is a baby? A baby is a fertilized egg, or a baby is a baby that has, legs and so on. So we don't even know who is the patient, and we don't know the treatment, and we don't know the disease. We should not attach to definition. But definitions are still important. They're important for insurance company. They're important for the employer. They might be important for the government. And we should adapt. We should do something in between in order to define it. But I think that scientifically it becomes very flexible and with very soft and broad margins.
Thank you so much.